back in the saddle again here at Prop Talk with Mikey Trudel and myself, Chris Call. And today we have a repeat offender.
Yeah,
right?
we don't get many of those on the show.
I know. I think this is the first time. Larry Zanoff back in the room with us again in this brave new world, 2025 that we're in. We got a lot to talk about today.
We do.
We do. So I'm just gonna, I'm just get a quick overview. I mean, we've been talking a while about wanting to do a Rust postmortem, so we'll talk about that a little bit. And then the new safety bulletins that have come out since all of that. And also the firearms safety seminar that the PMG and yourself, we've been working on, that we're going to talk about that a little bit. But then also the International IA has officially made you and Brooke Yeaton. Thank you. The industry firearms experts officially. So congratulations for that.
Thank you very much.
That's brilliant, man. They made a good choice.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously. So let's start with that, Larry. How did this come about?
I think in the post-Rust world, everybody, including Local 44, realized that whenever certain firearms issues came up, there needed to be a subject matter expert that was on hand to answer certain questions and concerns. I had been the SME for Local 44 ever since the Rust incident.
What's SME?
Subject matter expert.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sorry. And I think that, the IA was just taking more notice, especially since SB 132 is now going into effect went into effect January 1st. So there was a little bit more awareness on a national and international level of needing someone to speak on behalf of prop masters and armorers and deal with any of those firearms issues.
Great. And so what is the SB? Is that
so
state?
SB 132 is the state of California law that went into effect on January 1st of 2025. It's the end result of the Cortese law that was proposed after the Rust incident.
Right.
Its current iteration is a work safety kind of law, or safety in the workplace, I guess is the correct term for it. And it's tied into the California film incentive in that it mandates certain training for any of the programs that are going to get tax incentive money from the state of California. It's a pilot program.
Okay.
But it mandates in the law certain training, not just for prop people, but anyone what's called in proximity to firearms or firearms use. ADs, directors, even actors. Actors for sure, because they're the ones using the firearms. You might be, a hair and makeup person that's right there on set. So it's kind of expanded the firearms issue beyond the classic prop world, and expanded that training requirement.
So, and now that training requirement, who's charged with that training? I mean,
contract services. Okay. CSATF has a specific S2 class that is dedicated to meeting the requirements of SB 132.
I see. So it's the same firearm training class, but enhanced. That we've taken before?
I'd say it's the same one, but more focused. So the S class is specifically designed for prop people. So there's a lot more in there about certain elements of firearms use, where the in proximity class is a narrowed, focused version that's more of just a general awareness.
Okay, and so that's going to start showing up in people's mailboxes, right? That they have to take this class.
Only for projects that are tied to the tax incentive. But I think all the other elements in the industry are starting to recognize that they need that kind of training anyway.
Sure.
All the different crafts that will be required. Obviously, CSATF we'll be sending out notifications.
So it's not tied to rosters or with certain crafts. They only have to take it if they get a job that they're working on.
You know what? I'm not an expert on that aspect of
Right.
it, so I'm not going to speak.
Fair.
On that right now. I think, as I said, it just started to be in effect as of January 1st.
Yeah.
So I think we're still on a bit of a learning curve how that's going to work.
Fair. Yeah. That makes sense.
And I'm assuming that because it is coming from the state of California, it is only required for people in California.
So no, I believe it's actually in the contracts now too for DGA. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
I hear you.
No, you're good.
We're all there.
Yeah, take your minute. Trust me.
Got a tickle at the back of my throat. And
Dude.
it won't go away.
No, yeah. I'm already good at better at marking this one than the last one. So I feel one episode in, I feel way more back in the saddle, even without a.
I know.
I got a trick to take care of this.
Oh yeah, dude. I got one of these. You want one of these halls?
Yeah.
That's what I got.
Lifesaver.
Yeah, Ricola. I'm telling you, man.
Yeah.
I'm an advocate.
Yeah.
We should, maybe they sponsor us.
Yeah, I'm
Wouldn't that
trying to
be
push.
something?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
trying to
well-
push Angle Dot to get us sponsored. Or
Well, I
wasn't
thought
it?
that was in the words.
I know. I know we're digressing, but
It's okay.
anyways, the membership was because that's why I texted Teresa right away when I got they're like, oh, here's our new sponsorship packet that's going through and there's magazine stuff. I was like, where's the podcast sponsor stuff? I was like, that's the stuff that was supposed to go. And she's like, well, I don't know if they can wrap their head around it, but they're gonna do it. They're gonna. I was like,
Okay.
all right.
And we have to get J.J. Abrams in here. And then
Yeah, I know. Yeah, totally.
That's
That's
it.
on you, Chris.
I know. I'm going to reach out, but we're going to probably have to go to Bad Robot.
That's fine with me. I'll bring all the cameras and everything.
There you go. Okay.
To my knowledge, the pilot program is in effect both in Georgia and New York as well.
Okay.
And some of the different guilds, DGA and whatnot, have adopted some of the language from SB 132 into their own contracts.
Okay.
So there's going to be a little bit more of a wider
Net.
aspect to this, and
Yeah.
hopefully someday it will become a national standard.
Well, that's my goal. Okay, because it seems like to me most of the egregious mistakes and violations don't happen here in Hollywood.
Are you of the opinion that you think that every single craft should take the S1 or the Firearms or one of these courses through contract services?
I think that if you're going to be on set working around these items, that yes, you absolutely should, regardless of your position.
Just
on
to
the
have a light
thumbprint.
understanding of
Yeah.
what it is.
I mean,
It
look,
only
I'm
helps.
a prop guy, and I had to take a scissors lift class.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Now, if someone says, hey, we need that scissor lift moved, I'm not going to jump up and say, hey, I took the class. Let me do that. But having knowledge of that piece of equipment has been helpful. I know that, as an armorer, I've had to do like off-camera gunfire, and sometimes they want it. Hey, get up on the scissors lift.
Right.
Sure.
And all that. So I know all about the fall protection and those things
Right.
because it applies to our craft. So if you're going to be on set around these types of equipment, I think you should have some basic knowledge of
yes.
it. And that includes the firearms aspect.
Yeah. I mean, especially to just flag light things that a stupid person who says they're an armorer might be doing. That the makeup person would be like, I don't think you're supposed to be doing that.
Right.
And that's really the main goal behind all of these trainings is to empower the people that maybe weren't as knowledgeable about things to be able to look at something and say, that doesn't seem right to me, and at least bring up a question. Because
Right.
if you can kind of head something off at the pass,
Sure.
hopefully that will lead to less incidences on
Right. And
set.
I'm hopeful as well that as this training gets introduced into the SAG, it's going to make actors a lot more comfortable with the idea of weapons on set as well. Because I'm sure, again, after Rust, the knee-jerk reaction is just no, never again. Don't do this. We're not going to use them. And I mean, I don't know about you, Larry, but it seems to me like that tide is really swinging in that direction in a big way. And I'm hoping that we can swing it back because I think it's really important that we still have that option. But at the same time, I'm not opposed to, having all the options available to us as well. But I think the linchpin, though, is in education and making people comfortable with firearms and understanding that they're not intrinsically dangerous the way we use them in the field.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest here. There was a knee-jerk reaction right after the incident, which is totally understandable. By the same token, 3 years down the road now, a little over 3 years, there's been certain lines drawn in the sand. There are productions that, as you say, have taken we're never going to use any kind of firearm again.
Tyler Perry.
The one we just...
There's other productions that say, look, we know how to do this safely. We hire professional people to do it. We've been doing it for 120 some years. This can be done. In some projects, it should be done because it lends so much authenticity to the specific production.
Right.
And so there's the do's and the don'ts. There's two camps, and everybody else kind of falls somewhere in the middle. Let's not forget that the safety bulletin number 1, even the one dated 2003, always stated, when you need a rubber gun, you use a rubber gun. When you need a replica gun, you use a replica. And when you need a real one, you can use a real one if it's supervised. So the rule in prop world has always been use the correct prop for the correct scene. I think in the newly printed 2024 safety bulletin number 1, we've increased the language about that, and made it clear that always use the right option for the scene that you're filming.
Right. What else in the new safety bulletins? That.
So the safety bulletins, both 1 and 2, have been rewritten, and I will start out by saying that they are much better documents now than the 2003 documents. Having said that, I'll be honest with you, there was nothing wrong with the 2003 documents.
Right.
So it's not so much a rewrite as an update, if you will.
Right, and it really goes into further detail, right? Like the 2004 one's 8 pages, where the 2003 is 4, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think it's like 4 and 7 or something like that. So one of the things is we've added a glossary of terms.
That's good.
So that when you're dealing, like we said, maybe that sound mixer or that hair and makeup person who's now looking at safety bullet number 1, if you're using terms like dummy inert cartridge or, solid plug or airsoft, they may not know what those terms mean.
Right.
A prop person will, but these other kind of ancillary crew members, they don't have that knowledge. So having a glossary of terms we thought would be a good thing. We also we uniformed all of the terminology. One of the key things that I was trying to push through is that the first step to a national standard is having recognized terms and terminology that is used universally, whether you're in Georgia or California, whatever it may be. So we looked at the older 2003 document, and we kind of made everything a little bit more uniform there. So there's a lot of different things that you'll see. We've also have added a whole section about training in the safety bulletin itself. We've made chain of custody much clearer. Obviously, there was a lot of talk in the Rust incident about who actually handed off the firearm, and we won't get into that right now, but that became a big bone of contention, in the discussion. And so we've kind of made it cut and clear as to who are the only people on set who are supposed to be handling or touching the firearms. So if you get a chance, go ahead and read through them. They're available online to everyone. It's not a union-only kind of thing, which I think is a great service, by the way, that CSATF does, contract services. You can just search for industry-wide safety bulletins, and anybody who's trying to make a film can look through them and see all the do's and don'ts that are required.
That's good. So as far as the safety bulletins, these are also something that's not just uniform to certain regions. It's internationally, or it's. I mean, like in the state of New York, I mean, because I know like their gun rules are different than California.
So contract services, of course, they rule supreme in California.
Right.
If you are working on a film set in California, it's a union show. You can't set foot on the set unless you've taken all the contract services classes.
Right.
Outside of California, there's not the requirement of you must take these classes. However, through the Training Trust Fund, the other locals that are out there can provide training.
Right.
So I've traveled all over the country, including internationally, to go out and assist different IA locals, teach classes, and then it's free to the membership because the unions get it reimbursed through the Training Trust Fund.
Right.
Me personally, because of my experience with contract services, the classes that I teach are in line with the contract services classes. And the goal being that, like I said, ultimately there will be kind of this organic national standard that will come about because we're using all the same terms,
Sure.
using the same training philosophy and different things like that.
But do you know if IA International has plans to make this mandate so for everybody in the country, or is it just an Hollywood mandate?
I do not know of any plans currently beyond contract services rules and regulations in California. I can definitely look into that and get back to you on that.
Yeah, I mean, again, I just have to keep reiterating this: the playing field is not level. Okay, and this is where the problem arises in my eyes. That's what happened with Rust. Okay, because those people in New Mexico never would have been able to be on a set in California, right? Doing what they were doing. So I'm really interested in finding out how we could get to a place where, like you said, not only the terminology is uniform, but the training and the mandate for the training is also uniform across the board as well.
Well, I think I totally agree with you, first of all, on everything you just said. I think the way to get there is obviously union membership supporting union production. That would be the very first thing. And then union rules about mandatory training, not just with firearms, but again, like we said, fire extinguishers,
right,
air pollution, sound pollution, all those different classes that we have to take in California, you would hope one day would be required universally. But even if it's not written somewhere that it's required universally, the other IAs outside of California are much more aware of the fact that, I don't want to say that they're lagging, but because their classes are not mandatory, it seems like they try even harder.
Yeah.
And so the classes, at least with the firearms part, where I've been, be it to Boston or Georgia or Hawaii, or Chicago, wherever it may be, their thirst for the knowledge is there. And it's really great to go out to those different locals and work with them, because the dedication that you'll see in much smaller markets than we're used to here in LA. But you'll have people that are coming off of a 14-hour night, but still show up to class because they recognize how important it is. So I think with that kind of attitude and with the improvements that are being made, some of the impetus of SB 132, different guilds adapting some of that language into their contracts and requiring training and everything, I think it's almost naturally going to become a national standard at some point.
And have you been talking to Brooke then about that? And what? I don't what's the split between you and him? Because it has to do with being on the West Coast and
Where's
there,
Brooke?
right?
Where's Brooke located?
Brooks
New Orleans,
in New Orleans in Texas primarily is his stomping ground. I've known Brooke for maybe 25 years now. Very capable prop master. He's the head of the local union there, and he's a very good armorer as well. This announcement from the IA is relatively new.
Sure.
So I think we're at a position right now where the positions he and I, and it may split up mostly West Coast, East Coast,
Right.
but it's kind of in our hands to make of it what we can.
Okay.
Okay.
Nice.
And he and I think, are of the same, thought process as far as what's required, what's really needed, what the national standard should look like.
Yeah.
And again, not just to give kudos to contract services, but contract services is the only universally recognized body in our industry, and all of their classes are extremely good.
Yeah.
So as I said, the 2003 safety bulletin, we've updated it, but there was really nothing wrong with it. Had that bulletin been followed on the set of Rust,
Right.
just even the 2003 one, the incident would never have occurred.
Right.
So I think we owe a tipping of the hat to contract services
100%.
as saying that's the way to do it.
Right.
Maybe implemented everywhere. I'm not involved in the politics of that, but that format of training, I think, is beneficial.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. You've said that you've been invited by other locals around the country to come and do classes. Have you been invited to New Mexico? Have you done a class there?
I have done seminar there. We have a very, very talented prop master / armorer by the name of John Navarro,
Oh, yeah.
who works out in New Mexico, who's also very enthusiastic about
Excellent.
firearms and firearms training. And I was invited out there, and he and I put on kind of a joint program. I was also in New Mexico prior to the Rust incident, but I think the nature of the training has changed as a result of that incident. So, yeah, we've been all over. They've always been received very, very well, all these trainings. The PMG, of course, is pushing this idea as well. And I think we've got a good chance of creating something national. And let's face it, Hollywood is known worldwide. When you think of films, you think of Hollywood. So things that we implement here will spread.
Right.
We have to work at it. We have to get it all out there and everything. But people take the lead from what they see happening in California and in Hollywood. And that's kind of what we're concentrating on right now.
Right. Well, I hope I have high hopes.
We all do. We all do.
I really
Yeah.
do. And so I mean, I would love to think that something as tragic as Rust will have something good come from it. I mean, again, like you're saying, which is absolutely true. The safety bulletins, as they stood, were perfectly fine as long as they were adhered to, which they were not. So, it's a little frustrating, to think that we have to kind of reinvent the wheel that works perfectly fine. So, I just want to make sure that people understand that it's not really. We have to do things differently now. We just have to make sure that everybody's doing the things that they should have been doing.
For sure. When we had the tragedy that happened with Sarah Jones, right? And then you have the Rust tragedy, and you mentioned the Sarah Jones incident, and 50% or more of the people in the industry during Rust went, who?
Right.
Right? I mean, so it was things get out of our consciousness very, very quickly. I think that the IA, by creating these positions and appointing myself and Brooke to these positions and working with the PMG and contract services, our goal is to make sure that doesn't fade from the consciousness of film sets.
Right.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think having like the industry standard is important. And obviously there's been somewhat of an industry standard, but making more classes to make qualified people and just people more knowledgeable round and universally everywhere, that's kind of the same knowledge that's being passed on. I think that's something that's more
It's
important.
key.
It's key, and I think that's something that's like it's been tough. Like for the longest time, I didn't know where to look for that education or anything like that. So I think that making that accessible is a huge deal.
Yeah. I mean, let's face it. The general public, even though they're in love with all these action films and all that, the general public probably never realized that there was a position called armorer on a movie set until Rust.
Right.
There were probably, maybe more on the non-union side, but there's probably people within the industry that were working on non-union shows and things like that that really didn't realize that that was a specialty position.
Right.
So I agree with you, and Rust is an unbelievably tragic scenario, but if there is some kind of silver lining to be gleaned from it, it's this heightened awareness of what can be done and how it's to be done.
Right.
It can be done safely, but you have to dedicate the right people and the right resources to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's segue into Rust.
Okay.
Because, I mean, I think there's a lot of, because the trial just ended and it ended in a mistrial, correct? Is that what it was?
No, it was dismissed.
Dismissed, right.
It ended in a dismissal.
Right. So people didn't get to really see the full wrap up. I mean, we obviously...
And I'm sorry, let's be clear. You're talking about the Alec
Baldwin.
trial. There was another trial.
I was about to say
that. Yes, I was just going to say that. Yes. No, we all saw Hannah.
Yeah.
In her trial, and again, I watched the whole thing front to back, and I'm not going to cast aspersions against people. She had no business doing what she was doing, but at the same time, I also want to make it clear that it wasn't just a fundamental breakdown of her, but it was the production as well. I mean, in my opinion.
So, whenever you look at incidences that are safety breaches or whatever you want to call it, whether it's on a film set or on the deck of an aircraft carrier, there's procedures. Everything has certain steps that you need to live by.
Right.
And whenever you have a breakdown in the procedure, it's usually not one specific thing.
Sure.
It's a series of breakdowns. And you're right. On the Rust set, there was a series of breakdowns of procedure. It wasn't just the armorer situation. It was the safety brief situation. It was a first AD situation. It was maybe a training situation. There's all kinds of things that can be pointed at.
Right.
The key for me, of course, it starts with the armorer. The person who's responsible for the firearms has to be the person that's 100% on the ball all the time, front and center, But that production clearly had some other issues that were going on.
For instance, making the armor also the assistant property master and giving her the responsibilities of handling props as well. I mean,
yeah, honestly, I don't know about that so much. It's kind of accepted, not anymore, of course, but pre-Rust, you could get hired on as like the third prop assistant, and then on days where there's a lot of firearms, you get bumped up to be the armor. It's a little bit odd for that to happen on a Western.
Well, that's what I'm
where
saying.
Where there's
everybody has a firearm.
That's exactly what I mean.
But the idea of this, that there was split attention or something, it's like I don't know for a fact that influenced this scenario.
Okay.
I don't recall ever hearing during her trial that she was absent from where the firearms were because she was out prepping horse saddles or prepping the next scene.
Sure.
I think she was just kind of MIA in a way. And when you have split responsibility like that, when the firearms are in play, you step up and you become the armorer.
Right.
It doesn't matter what else is going on. The firearms are on set. You need to be on set.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure that that division of responsibility is a core issue. However, I will point out that in the new safety bulletin and in SB 132, it does clearly state that if you are working at that particular moment as armorer, that's the only thing that you are to be working on.
Right.
So again, kind of common sense stuff that you could read in between the lines in the 2003 version of the safety bulletin, we kind of put in black and white bold print in the new iteration.
But that's also meaning, whereas like a lot of shows in the past, I mean, experienced people, the prop master would armor their own shows. They can no longer do that, correct? Or they have to step out of the prop master role?
Exactly. It's not that they can't. It's like, okay, well, if you're not going to be prop master because you're dealing with the firearms, then you need to hire someone else to take your position so that there's not kind of being pulled in two directions.
Right.
Sure. I mean, well, again, I mean, I've done many films where I handled all the weapons, and I never had an armor on because, you know, it wasn't a lot of weapons. But so when you're doing those scenes, you're obviously focused on the weapons, you know, and then if there's other background stuff that needs to happen, the rest of your crew's handling that. I mean, I also just want to make sure that we're not losing our agency as property masters. You know, again, I understand that there are a lot of prop masters that don't want to deal with any firearms in any way, shape, or form, and you know, I respect that. And if they want to bring in an armorer and they have the money to bring in an armorer, then they should do that, and that'd be great. But I also want to make sure that, you know, I mean, we as the PMG want to also try to embolden property masters with a seminar, as we're going to talk about, so they at least have the basic understanding of what they're doing and what's required, so they can make a more informed decision about whether or not they want to handle it or if they want to pass it off, but they could still speak about it.
Yeah, and you've said a couple different things here.
Yeah, I did.
So let's break it down. I don't think it's correct to say things like you just said, or you said, well, I've done shows where I've handled the firearms myself and didn't bring in an armorer. Mm-hmm. The minute you were handling those firearms, you in fact became the armorer.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you are the person who's responsible for the firearms in all aspects. So, you know, it's kind of a change in mentality a little bit, because it's not just a title; it's about a function. You know, who is the person functioning with the firearms? If it is you, sure. Yeah, you're a prop master, but you're functioning as the armorer in that particular case. So that's one thing. That's
a broader definition than I had for armorer.
Yeah, I mean, there's, and that's another thing too. I mean, it's a little bit of a difference between when you say armor, let's say in a law enforcement agency,
right,
or you say armor out on a gun range,
or in an armory,
or you say armor out on a movie set.
Right.
What are we talking about here? Per the safety bulletins, the armorer is basically an expert prop person who is dealing with the firearms.
Right. Okay.
You may carry a prop master card, but if you also have your EFP or your dangerous weapons permits, and you're the person signing out the firearm from the armory, then as far as a crew position, you have become the armorer.
Yeah.
That's why, again, in the safety bulletin, we've reiterated that if you do not have the expertise, if you do not have the knowledge, before you take that responsibility on, you should either get that knowledge or, like you said, decide that you're not going to deal with it at all and hire, you know, some other subject matter expert to do that. But you're right. Firearms are part of our craft.
Right.
We can't let that part of our craft get lost. It's not a Second Amendment issue. It's not a pro-gun or anti-gun. It's part of our craft in storytelling.
Right. And
the world is the way it is, and art kind of copies reality. And so there's a lot of guns out there in the world. And so you're going to see firearms in film. And I think you're right. And I think the work that the PMG is doing as far as trying to make sure we don't lose that element of our craft is extremely important.
Right. So back to Rust. Do you feel that, I mean, what do you feel that was the fundamental breakdown then? I mean, besides... hand his responsibilities? I mean,
I to be ultra simplistic, I could say the fundamental breakdown was that the safety bulletin number 1 was not followed.
right.
and that one statement includes multiple different things.
Right.
You had an armorer that maybe wasn't up to the job as far as experience and knowledge.
Right.
You had things in the safety bulletin that implied that whenever the firearms were on set, the armorer should be on set. The armorer wasn't there when the firearms were on set.
Right.
There's stipulations about safety meetings every day, and then every incident specific, so you have your safety brief in the morning with everyone, but then every setup that you do, if you're having gunfire or special effects or something like that, you have to have another little safety brief just before the filming. All that was stated in the safety bulletin. I wasn't on the set of Rust, but from what we've heard, none of that was occurring.
Right.
There was also, and we spoke about this last time, a week before the incident itself, there were members of the crew who had complained about some safety issues, not just firearms. There were other issues, 3 major issues, and they presented it as a concern to the production, and evidently that those concerns were not addressed.
Right.
So I think it's the totality. Very young crew, very inexperienced. I think we said this last time we talked, on Prop Talk. You had an actor, Alec Baldwin. It's not a matter of one actor being more important than another, but Alec Baldwin is a A-list actor. You should have had A-list crew interacting with him.
Right.
And so there was just this totality of failures, throughout, unfortunately. And it created that perfect storm, as they say.
Right. So as far as like a lot of the hearsay that surrounded the trial, in the chain of command of the weapons, handling the weapons and stuff, I mean, do you have any insight into that? I mean, again, we had all heard that, the first AD came and took the gun off the cart and brought it into the set. Then in the trial, it seemed it came out.
Turned out that it wasn't quite that way.
Yeah, right. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I think, we now know there were 14 people in that church set when the incident occurred. None of those 14 were the armorer.
Right.
They were setting up a shot, right? They weren't actually
Filming.
up and filming.
Right.
They were trying to block something out. It seems like if you listen to the trial, testimony, it seems like maybe they needed a firearm. The armor was not present. The AD walked over to a cart, picked up a firearm, made the announcement, cold gun on set. And then everybody in the church that then gave a police report after the incident of, it was the AD who handed it to him. At that moment, they were correct. But then later, the armorer came back in and said, gee, we're going to film this. She then took the firearm back, put dummy cartridges, or what was presumed to be dummy cartridges, into it, made some announcement to the AD or some communication to the AD, who then did or did not check it appropriately.
Right.
And then the firearm was handed back again to Alec Baldwin. So
she basically opened the chamber, spun it, right, and didn't show that each of the dummies that were in there were actual dummies, right?
Right. I mean, looking at the back end of a dummy in a cylinder, you can't just by looking at it tell. You needed to pull each one out and rattle each one.
Right.
But I guess my point is, the people that may have testified, it was the AD who handed it to him, they were right. But then the people that were saying, no, it wasn't, they were right also, because it was actually 2 different instances.
Right.
And having worked on set last 25 years now, I could see where that could happen.
Yeah.
Of course.
Right? I mean, you
Things
were
change
there,
all
you
the
kind of
time.
looked at something, then you turned away because you were dealing with, maybe you're the electrician or the special effects technician.
Sure,
And
right.
you didn't see someone come in and then, retrieve the firearm, put dummies in, stuff like that happens. But the trial was very illuminating because 2.5 to 3 years down the road from the incident, it became very clear that a lot of the media information was incorrect.
Right.
Everybody had already made up their minds about things. Everybody was already, 100% clear on exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And everybody became an expert at it and all that. When you get down to the dry facts in the trial and reading the police reports and everything, turned out that it wasn't necessarily so.
Right. I don't know. Is there anything else that that stuck out in your mind about from the trial that you felt was an important point? I mean, again, for me, I just have to throw in that we could talk about Alec Baldwin's culpability as an actor as opposed to a producer, because there's that whole thing again, there's such thing as a vanity producer as opposed to somebody who hires somebody. So there's that issue, which, you go on the internet and it's just rampant with people who think, that just because he's Alec Baldwin that he should burn in hell, but I personally feel like, there is a little bit of play in there for me, that as an actor, he shouldn't have to think about that weapon in any way, shape, or form other than he just knows that it should be safe when it gets handed to him because he has a job called acting, which takes a lot of focus. Okay. But at the same time, as you mentioned, there were other incidents on the set prior to when this happened. There, the pacing of the show was such that there was a lot of rushing happening, so you could make an argument that as a producer and the number one on the call sheet, you have a lot of power to be able to say, hey, let's slow stuff down here a little bit. But again, how do you feel about that?
So I personally, I've always had a problem with this idea of, well, are you charging him as the producer or are you charging him as an actor? It's like, no, he's one person, Alec Baldwin. You're either charging him or you're not. And I've said from the very beginning that despite the fact that he had a firearm in his hand, and despite the fact that it did lead to a fatality, that he, as the person standing there, was not responsible for what occurred. Everybody, in the firearms community got up in arms. Oh my God, they violated the first rule of gun safety. Never point a gun at someone and all that. And I've always said that, first of all, it's a rule. It's not a law.
Yeah.
Right. So that's number one. Secondly, you have to judge the situation based on the conventions of the situation.
Right.
On a film set.
Right.
We point guns at people all the time.
All day long.
We look down the barrel.
We look down the barrel. We crash helicopters. We flip, pickup trucks over. We do stunts.
Right.
We do all kinds of things like that. We do things that are not acceptable under different circumstances, like at a gun range,
right,
or at your house or something like that.
With live fire, yeah.
With live fire, it's not acceptable to point the gun at someone unless you intend to shoot them. But on a movie set, it's different. How is it different? You have a specialist who's there to make sure that there's no rounds that are live rounds and that it's all set up and that it's safe.
Right.
And so when that position of armorer fails, that is where you point the finger as far as, where the responsibility lies. You're absolutely right. Alec Baldwin is an actor. He's got to hit his mark. He's got to remember his lines. He's playing make pretend, but he's got to make it look convincing. Because if it doesn't look real, the audience isn't buying into that. And that's what you're after, right?
Right.
Creating an illusion for 2 hours for the audience to buy into. He's also a human being. He's got, things he's thinking about, in his home life. He's got time schedules. He's got interviews for other shows and all. So there's a lot going on. And in addition, you want him to be a gun expert.
Right.
It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Just like he's not a stunt expert.
Right.
Right? You have a stunt coordinator who's going to set everything up. No actor is asked to go look at the air ram gauge,
Right.
on a wire gag
Sure.
to see if it's set for the right poundage.
Right.
I think the firearms get, a little bit more scrutiny because it seems to be this emotionally charged issue from outside the movie
Correct.
set.
Right.
There's all kinds of political opinions about it and things like that. So, I think the result of both trials are correct.
Mm-hmm.
I clearly think the armorer is the last person responsible for the firearms and all aspect of firearms should be held responsible. In addition, I think that the actor, is an actor. That's what they're there to do, to act. Now, I wish that maybe Alec Baldwin's trial had gone full term.
Right.
And we had actually walked away with a not guilty verdict.
Yes. I
As
agree.
opposed to a dismissal.
Well,
But it's still the correct. The judge at the end of the day, she even said at one point, and this was prior to the dismissal, she told the prosecuting attorney, it's like, and her exact words were, "I'm having a very hard time wrapping my head around what you're trying to charge him with."
Right.
It was like the case was so muddled. It's like, where is the criminal intent? If you're going to hold someone responsible criminally,
right.
you have to be able to show the criminal intent. And that simply wasn't there.
Yeah.
Right.
So I don't even think it's a question of was it right or wrong to dismiss. I think there should have never been charges against Alec Baldwin to begin with.
Right, I agree.
Right. Yeah.
I agree. Well, the other thing that frustrated me and I didn't understand was the defense notion that he didn't pull the trigger. I mean, that seemed like a crazy notion. I mean, he should be able to pull that trigger all day long, whether there was anything in the gun or not, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, let's be honest. There was the interview that he did with, I think it was George Stephanopoulos.
Right.
And he made a point of saying,
Yes.
I didn't pull the trigger. And so that became the focal point. But I agree with you. It doesn't matter whether he pulled the trigger or not. It really doesn't. If the director of photography wanted to get a shot of the hammer being cocked and the cylinder turning and all that, and you have to do this on a movie set, you do things repeatedly.
Yeah.
People don't understand that, but it can take you 3 hours to film 15 seconds because you do it take after take after take. And so why wouldn't you have pulled the trigger? And this idea that it wasn't necessary, it wasn't in the script for him to pull the trigger. You're talking about a creative process. People are on the spur of the moment going like, oh, you know what would be cool or wouldn't it be interesting if... And so it's a process that you're being creative on set. That's how these movies that, win Academy Awards, and that's what everybody's after, that's how they happen. There's a lot of spontaneity.
Sure.
So this idea of, well, he wasn't even supposed to pull the trigger, that doesn't ring true to me because I've been on so many different sets where people improvise.
Right.
And some of the improvisation is the best performances that come out.
Well,
again, that was something that I think the media just played on.
Absolutely. And again, like you say, most people have no clue what happens on a film set. Okay. And some of the conversations that were had in that trial were just mind-boggling to me. That people who were supposed to be experts, who they brought in, had no clue. What they kept talking about it in the context of a firearm that has live ammo in it, as opposed to a movie. I mean, where were the movie experts? That should have been in that.
There was definitely a lack of that on that set, and it's no It's no reflection on the film scene in New Mexico. Mm-hmm. There are very capable people there, no doubt. Unfortunately, they weren't on this particular production.
Right, which brings me back to the original problem with the whole production is the people who were hiring the people who came in. And this is what I don't see any movement towards. I mean, again, there's all this movement towards, educating people better and being more safe and all that, but part of that safety needs to come from people who are hiring people. Hiring people who are capable of doing the job, even if it's going to cost you more money. Okay, because that's really what it comes down to. Because I know personally people who interviewed for that job who said, this is what I need to do this job properly. And they were like, yeah, no. Okay, we want to do it for cheaper. Okay, that's really the bottom line. Okay, that's the culprit of what happened in New Mexico on this movie is they were trying to do this movie for as cheap as they could, and they paid the price for it, in my opinion. Okay, because, they could have listened to the people who were experts, or at least more experts than because again, I mean, a young kid, you get offered a job, you're going to take the job. You want the job, right? Who's going to say, yeah, no, I don't really have the chops to do this job. You think you're going to do it. I mean, I myself, as a young property master, I was over my head a lot of times on productions, not necessarily gun productions, but just in general. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of like what we do is we make it up as we go. So do you see that there's any motion in that direction of being more responsible from a production standpoint and hiring people, the right people to do the job? Well, is there any pressure to be bear?
Yeah, let's be clear on one thing here. The criminal case with an actor like Alec Baldwin, that was in the headlines, and that's what everybody, really concentrated on. However, there was the New Mexico Environmental Report, which is like their Cal OSHA, that did their own investigation, that found the production guilty, if you will, of certain procedural failures. Sure. They were fined, I think it was $137,000, something like that, which doesn't seem like a lot amount of money, considering that someone lost their life and a child lost their mother and a husband lost his wife. However, they did charge them with the maximum fine that under New Mexico law is allowable. So it's not like the production, this faceless production, didn't bear any responsibility.
Sure.
They were the employer. The employer is responsible for safety in the workplace. Our workplace is a movie set.
Right.
And so hiring the right people, training and things like that, and following up on those things is the production's responsibility. They were found to be in breach of that by the New Mexico Environmental Report, and they were fined the maximum that was allowable to be fined. I think that there are now, going back to what we started out this conversation with, there are now productions and or producers who pay much more attention, who either make the decision to either not use firearms at all or, to hire the right people. I've worked on endless, and I'm sure both of you have as well, endless low-budget shows, but they spend the money in the right spot.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right? So you're a low-budget, little nothing production, if you will. So maybe your rap party isn't as big as you want it to be, but when you have gunfire, you hire a competent armorer. Right? And I think that awareness has definitely been elevated since the Rust incident. However, like I said before, I think that was elevated after the Sarah Jones incident too.
Right.
But, people have a very, very short memory about things like that.
Yeah. And I mean, most of the person that I may have mentioned this in the last time we did, but the persons who I've heard about this whole thing that's been mentioned the least is the prop master.
Right.
I don't even know her name or their name.
Sarah Zachary.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, every single job I've ever worked where we've had to hire an armorer, I've been the person to seek out and find that armorer. Was that not the case that happened in this situation?
Again, I think both the prop master position and the armorer position were based on local recommendations. Very unclear exactly how they were staffed. There was a question at one point as far as the armorer. Like, was the armorer employed by the production, or were they independent contractors? It's
Right.
The whole thing was very unclear. New Mexico is a smaller market.
Right.
It's not like California or New York, and so there's a lot of nepotism and networking and people trying to get other people jobs. And so I think it's a little bit unclear on exactly how or why these people were specifically picked.
Yeah, and that's why I bring it up too, because like as a prop master, like I want to be the person to bring in the most qualified professional as armorers, like being in the business and meeting a lot of like people. It's like I know specifically with a lot of these people, and if I don't, I know like ISS or like people like Larry and stuff like that will know the right people for the right projects to do that. So I don't want that to be taken away from the prop masters.
Right.
As far as to be able to be the person that production comes to confidently be like, no, that we will bring in the right people. You know?
Yeah, and I don't think there's a danger of that. I think our unions do a very good job of contractually negotiating with the producers and the studios, and it's very clearly written out, even in the newly updated safety bulletins, that the prop master is the prop master.
Right.
And he or she is responsible for all props. Now, they may decide, Chris, like yourself, that you've been doing this for a long time and you have one handgun in the scene. You're the prop master, but you have the correct training and the correct permits, and you want to run that gun yourself. Then, like I said earlier, in that moment, you have become the on-set armor.
Right.
Or you might decide the guns are very modern, they're very futuristic. I haven't run that type of firearm before. I've got 1,000 other props in the scene. I'm just going to hire a separate armor who's dedicated to that. And the updated safety bulletin, again, does put stress on proper staffing as far as when firearms on set, to have the right people and the right number of people and things like that. So I don't think we're in danger of, having that aspect taken away from prop masters.
Right.
The armor is technically a prop person. It's just their specialty prop person. And our unions, especially 44, do a very good job, of maintaining that, craft integrity.
Now, and it's, speaking of that, is that's something that IA is, or at least 44 is working on, creating a classification and a certification for armor. Is that correct?
There's talk and we're investigating the different possibilities. Don't know what will come of that.
Sure.
We'll have to see. I think that regardless of where it comes from, and we said this again the last time we talked, the number one thing that the Rust incident put a spotlight on is that there was no standard national standard in place as to who, what an armorer was, how you get training to be an armorer, and so on. So regardless of whether it's through 44 or it's contract services or it's the PMG or the IA or whatever, regardless of who leads, we need to make sure that from here on out, we are working on some kind of national standard.
Absolutely.
That everybody's doing things the same way.
Yep.
And that's international as well, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean that's another McGill altogether. I mean, how they handle weapons abroad. I mean, do you have any understanding of?
I think the American film industry, when it works abroad, would wind up at least with like a department head coming from the U.S., maybe hiring some locals. But if that department head is aware of the national standard, then they're going to enact that standard, be it in Thailand or Prague or Budapest or wherever it may be. Your geography doesn't lessen the bar as far as what is safe and what is not. Right. And once we get it out there that these are the basic expectations, then I think people will be kind of adopting them universally.
Right. Well, and again, that brings me back to the property master, as Mikey was saying on Rust. Her experience was very minimal as a property master, and certainly when it comes to weapons,
right?
Which gave her no agency to be able to speak about it in any way.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure she was more than happy to just say, "Yeah, okay, hands off. I have nothing to do with this," and that absolves her of that responsibility to a certain extent. It's certainly with production, because they're like, "No, we have an armor, so we're good." So what myself is chair of the education committee of the PMG. What I'm committed to doing is creating, and we've been working with Larry. We've started fleshing out this motion picture firearms safety seminar with this very intention. I mean, we want to be able to, like you say, create a uniform experience and understanding across the board of everybody who works in the industry. But specifically towards prop people, we are looking to be able to create a seminar, a basic understanding of motion picture firearms, because they're different than regular firearms, and how it applies into the film industry, with not just the intention of giving the agency to a property master to be able to handle weapons on set, but just to have the basic understanding so they know if they can or cannot do it. And at the very least, be able to speak to, in a production meeting, I'm taking on this show and there's weapons in it. I personally don't feel like I want to handle those, and I'm going to bring an armor in for it, but at least they will know how to speak about the weapons to the producer, the director, the actors, and the armorer, right?
For sure. And so, I think the PMG, we have a lot to thank the PMG for kind of spearheading that. We did one seminar that I think was very successful, a workshop, very well taken by everyone that was there. And you're right. The idea is to empower people. When you walk into a production meeting and someone's talking about, oh, we're going to do this big battle out in New Mexico, or it might be in Morocco.
Right.
You as the prop master need to be able to raise the question about, well, then that means an export permit for the firearms.
Right.
All these different little things. It's kind of you don't know what you don't know right now. We're trying to change that.
Sure.
We're trying to make it that everybody speaks the same language. That's part of the glossary idea, the terminology in the safety bulletin. Regardless of where you're at, you know the right questions to raise, use the same language, drive home the same messaging, using the same language even.
Right.
That's the goal, is to get it that uniform. They do it in the special effects industry.
Right.
They do it in other industries. There's no reason. And to be honest with you, the top tier of armorers in the industry, if you got them all together, you'd realize they were using the same terms.
Yeah,
sure.
We're just trying to make it wider now,
right.
Well,
and again, across crafts as well. So the first AD is using the same language. Because even in the Rust trial, they kept messing up the language, referring to, ammo and live rounds, and just there was a plethora of things that there was no consistency with.
Yeah, and let's be fair. the average deputy sheriff in New Mexico, they'd never been on a movie set before.
Of course.
They didn't know what they were looking at.
Right.
The day that it happened, nobody expected that we'd still be talking about it 3.5 years
Right.
later, and that it became kind of this media circus that it became. There was a lot of stuff even in the police reports and the way they were reported and the handling of some evidence and the consistency, like you say, of using certain terms and everything. I remember reading the police report and having one officer list all the things that they had confiscated from set, and they said, a firearm with the cylinders blocked off. Well, I know right away that was a replica.
Right.
What they're talking about is one of those Denix Spanish-made replicas where they've got a little plate on the inside.
Right.
And so right there, well, if it's a replica, it's not a firearm then. It's not a real gun. But they didn't know about replicas and rubbers and dummy cartridges. There was one officer that inventoried hundreds of what they called ammunition.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, to me, ammunition is real bullets, right?
Yeah.
There weren't hundreds of real bullets on that set. There was hundreds of dummy inert cartridges on that set.
Right.
But the officers didn't know what they were looking at. Of
course.
It looked like live ammo,
How
so
would
they
they?
listed it
Yeah.
as live ammo. So that whole education, I think, in one way, it's maybe better that this took 3.5 years, because by the time it got to trial, I think everybody was like, okay, we see what really happened here.
Right.
But yeah, that uniformity is definitely the goal that we're after.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Mikey, you want to talk about your experience taking the workshop at all? I mean,
Yeah. What are we allowed? Are we allowed to just talk about the
well,
whole
I
thing?
mean, sure. I mean, it's a work in progress. I mean, so everybody knows, the PMG is actively pursuing creating what we're calling the Motion Picture Firearms Safety Seminar.
Yeah.
Which is what we want to put out there to, first of all, prop people in general, and then we're going to modify that class to be able to offer it to other crafts. And the modification would basically be, we're going to do a lecture part of the class of the workshop or the seminar, and then the second half is going to be more hands-on, where you actually get to have a firearm in your hands, and as a property person, hopefully we want to get it to a point where you could actually fire blanks, so what the actor is having to experience. You're not just doing it, and again, these are things that we're working out because there's liability issues that we have to get past. But that's our goal, is to be able to provide that. And then that class that would move on to other crafts would have that element of the firing of the blanks taken out of it.
Yes.
So
so I think...
And so Mikey took the workshop.
Yeah, I took the workshop. And that's what I'm trying to say is, like, I think I probably got the best experience that anybody's ever going to get this workshop, because I didn't take the workshop just as a younger property master. I've taken it like with some of the greatest property masters in our industry, all held into it. I don't think anybody's ever going to get that experience. So there was like
we had the top 6 armorers in the world in there.
Yeah, you had the top armorers and prop masters in the world in there. So that was like a different thing. But going into this, like, I'm somebody that likes to educate myself no matter what it is. So I've taken 8-hour sit-down lecture courses on this before. I've taken multiple classes at the actual real firing range with real weapons before.
Right.
This, I definitely think, reigns above all of them, for the sheer fact that I've done armor stuff on set lightly with one shot with one handgun before, and that's about the extent to my knowledge, aside from assisting another armorer, helping him with a shotgun or loading magazines behind it, and that's my extent as armory work on set. This, I thought, was way better for property masters and people who looking to get into armors. That I think it's more important to do, because you have your lecture element, which is important. I think people can take days and days and days and multiple lectures over and over and over. I don't think it's gonna do what we need it to do until you actually put a blank firing weapon in their hand and say, okay, be an armorer, like you did in your course.
And that's great. I mean, everything you said just makes me feel really, really good about, the workshop that we did, because that was the goal.
Right.
Yes. It was, the lecture, death by PowerPoint, right? It's not just a lecture to have a lecture. It's a lecture to give you the tools that you need to do the job. And then the second half of the class was, okay, now here you have the tools.
Right.
Now do the job.
Now do the job, you
Yes.
know, and do it in, for want of a better word, a safe environment.
Right.
Absolutely.
Not making a mistake out on set. If you're going to make a mistake, let's do it in the classroom environment where we can all learn from it.
Right.
And get that experience. And the program that the PMG is, working on or developing, the goal is that you're not going to be an armorer when you walk out of that class.
Right.
However, you will have handled enough variety of firearms. You will have been forced into the position of actually doing the job. We role play.
Right.
Right.
So you're not getting out of there without having done it several times. Everything from having to stand in front of the class and do your own safety brief, to loading the firearm yourself, to measuring 20-foot safety distance. All the elements that we feed you in the lecture, you then are expected to be able to put into play. Right. And if nothing else, it's enough information, like you said earlier, Chris, that when you're in a production meeting, you're listening to something that, let's say, the stunt coordinator is saying, and your mind is already going, wait a minute, that means I'm going to need two armorers, one on the roof and one on the ground. Because we're doing a stunt and someone's jumping off a building with a gun. That's what we're trying. We're not going to make you an expert shot.
Right.
We're not teaching you how to be a gunfighter. The class was very narrowly, specifically focused on firearms on set.
Correct.
Which is a different environment than any other environment that you will ever be in with a firearm.
Right.
And so that makes me feel good.
Yeah,
like you,
and especially
that you said that.
Yes, and especially for me for this situation. I mean, I'm glad that it was put in with the amount of people, with the people it was, because let's say it's the same situation and you put it in with a bunch of people looking to take the class for the first time that don't know much about it. I would have been a lot more confident, a lot more confident. But they're like, why don't you do it with all the people I look up to the most and I aspire to be like one day? You know what I mean? Staring at me, it's like, okay, I'm a lot more humble right now.
Right. And it's also a great opportunity to, like you say, Larry, too, is to be able to do this and to role play this in a safe environment before you actually have to step on the set in front of an actor and the director and everybody and God and everybody, to do this the first time you ever do it.
So when, I think you know this, Chris, but I have a background in law enforcement.
Yes.
And when I was working in law enforcement, I had to get certified for testing unknown substances, right? And you go to a class, and it's a little, take the fluid from dropper A and put it in the pan and mix the white powder, and if it turns blue, whatever. And they made us do test after test after test. There was a logic behind that.
Sure.
Which was the very first time you do a drug test that goes all the way to a trial in court, and you stand up there and the defense attorney says, so, Chris, how many times have you performed this test?
Right.
You can now say, I've done it 14 times.
Right.
7 of them were positive and 7 of them were negative. That's how I tried to model that workshop that we did.
Yeah.
So that we could, and we'll expand on it more.
Right.
But that's the goal. You can almost meet every scenario that you might come up against in the class.
Nice.
Yeah. And you do it a little, doing it again with these amount of people and the way you slipped them in, I thought was so good. Like setting it up the first time, it's like, all right, we're going to fire some blanks. Everybody line up. We're going to do like a relay race and see who can get through this. So you go in, load it, unload a clip, clear it, and go into the back of the line. It's like, okay, well, I'm not going to tell you that there might be a wrong thing in there.
Right.
And you still got to call it out before somebody even noticed, It's like, and it's not to embarrass anybody or do anything. It's like, this is how easy it is to come up real quick. So you gotta be mindful, especially when someone's rushing you on set or like saying, this has to commit, this needs to be done. What is it? You know what I mean?
And that's great that those are the points that you picked up on, because that's the deal. We're not, the PMG is not putting this on just to say, look at us, we're putting on a class.
Yeah.
The PMG is putting this on to be a professional class.
Right.
That people actually, when they leave the class, they actually walk out of there feeling knowledgeable, empowered, confident. Even if that confidence is, I'm never going to touch a gun, I just want to hire an armorer.
100%.
But it's not a, okay, come take this class, don't worry about it because nobody ever fails. No matter what, you're going to go through the class and you're going to pass. No.
Right.
The bar is high.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And there are pitfalls, and that you will be tripped up and you will be questioned, and you're going to go back and second guess yourself on certain things. And that's the idea. Do it now in the class.
Right. Exactly.
In a very tightly controlled scenario, so that when you're out there, it's almost like you're easing into it. You go, well, I've done this a couple times before. We did the class.
Right.
I even took the class twice.
Exactly.
And so I feel a little bit more confident. And then you build your career from there.
Right.
You go out and you do the class. You go on set. You run a gun a couple times. Like you said, it's one gun.
Right.
Then all of a sudden you got a show where you got a big shootout and there's 12 guns.
Yeah.
Maybe you go into the armor, you go, hey, I need to touch up on this and that and the other. And how would you handle this? How do you control things? How many armors should we need? That's how you build the confidence and the knowledge to do it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Definitely.
I'm excited.
I think it's a great thing. Again, horrible that it has to be a tragedy that sparks the interest, but if we can't avoid the tragedy, then we should at least try to glean whatever silver lining there is out of it.
Right.
And that heightened awareness of training is what it is.
Exactly. And that's exactly how I feel about it. It's like, to me, that Rust incident was so tragic and on so many levels, but as a property master, it just broke my heart because I know it could have been avoided.
Yeah.
Okay. And for me to be able to honor Helena Hutchins in any way, it would be to be able to train. If we could train one person to do a better job and to have a better understanding of firearms on set, then I feel that we're making, I'm doing what I wanted to do. So I just, I'm very passionate about this program and about making it happen. And I'm so grateful to you, Larry Zanoff, for all of your expertise and your willingness to put this workshop together. And I just want everybody to know that it's going to happen. I'm going to make sure it happens one way or another. We're going to get past all these stumbling blocks, but early in the new year is our goal, is to start rolling this out. And then again, just so you know too, before I give it over to you, we're going to start the pilot program here in Hollywood, but the intention is that we're going to be able to offer it throughout the country.
For sure.
So
and I don't not to discount the severity of the Rust incident, but it's not just about honoring Helena. Mm-hmm. It's about honoring all of the crew members out on set, whether it's the people that were involved in the John Eric Hexam incident or in the Brandon Lee or the Sarah Jones incident. It's like safety is important out in the workplace.
Right.
And the only way we increase safety is through training and awareness.
Right.
Like we said before, most people who watch movies before the Rust scenario, they didn't even know that armorer was a position on a film crew.
Right.
So, we're already over that hurdle, right? But I think it's important, and the work that the PMG is doing to promote that, to promote safety, and professionalism.
Right.
It's not just being professional is being able to say to the outsider, that looks scary,
Right.
but as a professional, we've taken all of the mitigating steps. We know all the safety parameters. We've practiced, we've rehearsed, and I can confidently say we can move forward and do that scene safely.
Right.
That's what it's about too.
Yep. Absolutely.
Do you think, before we close out, do you think that, do you see a world where blank firing comes back like it used to, or it was a few years ago before this all happening on sets?
I can tell you that since October 21st of 2021, which is
Right.
when the incident occurred, we have worked with many production companies that, I don't want to use the term business as usual in a negative way, but for them, it was business as usual in the sense that they know who to hire. They're writing scripts. There's going to be gunfire in it. If they rent the right equipment and they hire the right people, they're confident that they're going to be able to do this safely.
Right.
So there's been no change, for some productions. I think there is a pendulum swinging right now. Right now, we're still a little bit at an extreme. I'm sure that when the Crow incident happened in 93, I wasn't
Right.
in the industry in 93, but I'm sure it took several years before, people kind of normalized again, more training, more professional people coming into the industry. So yeah, I don't think there will ever be a time where there's a situation where there's zero firearms and blank fire.
Right.
It just it would be saying like we're going to have a time where we're going to film a Western without real horses.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like,
absolutely.
Sure, you could do it.
Yeah.
You could do it, but it's just not going to look very good.
And it doesn't.
And our medium is a very visual medium.
Yeah.
Yes.
And actors, like we said, they improvise. They have to feel that they're in the part
Yeah.
and all that. And, when you see someone on a fake horse and you're like, oh, they're on a fake horse.
Right.
You can tell. It's the same thing with firearms. There's a body language involved. There's flinching and blinking of the eyes and different things like that. Even the lighting. When you fire a blank and you catch reflections of the blank fire in a pair of glasses or
Right.
in the eyes of an actor. I know every year there's several projects where the DP decides, I want to light the scene with the muzzle flash.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's a very difficult thing to do, but when it gets done, it's like, wow, that scene was impressive. When you get almost this strobe effect, and it's so there's always going to be those purists
Right.
that are like the job of the movie maker, of the filmmaker, is to set up a camera and have art play out in front of it, not make believe,
Right.
not
as close to
placebos,
reality as
Right.
possible.
close to reality as you can
Yeah.
possibly have.
Right.
Exactly.
And that doesn't mean 100% real.
Sure.
It just means as
Yeah.
close to reality as
Right.
is feasible, as is safe.
Yeah.
Going back to the safety bulletin, that's why it's like, hey, you know what, guys? In this scene, we're going to use the rubber gun.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
that's the right tool
Right.
for this scene.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
In the next one, we'll use the real gun with the flash, and it'll be more
yeah.
effective.
Yeah, I think I approach, because I'm in the process right now of trying to convince a production to use an Armorer and Real Firearms for this big scene. I think I asked your advice because I described, I was like, oh, well, there's guns throughout the movie, but then there's this one scene that in my mind, I can't picture it without. And I think that's the advice you get. And you're like, well, don't try to convince for the whole movie. Just try to convince for that scene.
Right.
If that's the scene that's going to
Absolutely.
make it, then that's a lot easier of a hurdle to get over than
Right.
And,
the
and it's,
whole movie.
and it's not just a hurdle issue. It's as a professional prop master, that's what your responsibility to the production is.
Right.
Yes.
Is to make that decision that in scene 1, 2, and 3,
Yeah.
I can use a rubber gun. It'll be easy. It'll be quick. It'll be safe.
Right.
In 3, 4, and 5,
Yes.
that's where the film, the creative process, needs the real gun with the blanks and whatever. And you putting that forward is just you being a professional prop master doing your job correctly.
Sure. Yeah. And also because the technology that we have now is much better than it used to be when we didn't have it. So, like, for instance, like, I've done scenes where somebody has to fire a weapon inside of a car. You know, we did a solid plug, but it was dicey. Okay. You know, now we don't have to do that because you could do it CGI and it's fine, you know, for something like that, you know, with an airsoft gun. So
everything, you know, I've used this analogy multiple times, but when you're a prop master or an armorer, who again is just a specialty prop person,
right.
You go out to set with a big bag of tricks.
Right.
Not one thing.
Right.
You don't put all the eggs in one basket. Yeah. You have all kinds of things. In this scenario, hey, we're going to do CGI. In that scenario, we're going to do a rubber gun. This one, we're going to do a real gun. And your job as the prop master, and that's another thing that I think as a result of the Rust incident, I think there's an elevated respect for who and what a prop master is. Yeah. How much the prop master is a key department head.
Yeah.
Not that it wasn't recognized before, but I think it's been elevated, you know, because again, when we were talking about Sarah Zachary, to me, it's not, oh, well, I don't have to worry about it because we hired an armorer and it's their responsibility. The armorer still works under the prop master.
Right.
The prop master is the prop master.
He
or she is supposed to be in charge and oversee everything. Mm-hmm. And that kind of mentality is the thing, along with professionalism and training, that will maintain this as part of our craft moving forward so that we can continue to do, you know, all the amazing films and all the great stunts and all the, you know, big shoot 'em ups that everybody enjoys and that we've done in the past.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm with you, brother. And we're glad to have you leading the charge is all I can say.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know Brooke Eaton, but if you vouch for him, then...
Brooke is a good guy. I think the way the IA has split it up is I'm responsible for questions about the general contract, and Brooke is working at a slightly different level, but we'll be working together complementing each other, and we'll see where we can take this. Just the recognition from the IA that the position is needed, I think is very huge. And of course, for both me and for Brooke, we're both extremely humbled that, you know, our peers have, you know, decided that we are the people that, as you say, should be leading the charge on that. It's always very humbling to have your other members, you know, say that. And I know, again, I've known Brooke for 20 some years, and he and I will not take that trust lightly.
I'm sure.
You know, we take that to heart.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for everybody in that lockup. Joe, Carl, Curtis. Like, anytime I walk into that cage, just for a suggestion, I always walk out with so much more knowledge and so much more understanding about the prop that I'm trying to get into or trying to figure out in a thing. And everybody has always been so friendly and so helpful every single time, even just for a question.
And not just that you learn something, but that you learn something that allows you to be confident out on set.
Oh, yeah.
When you're out there yourself, you know, doing it yourself.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Saves a lot of research time, too. Like, man, the knowledge in that room is insane.
Yeah. And everybody should, you know, take advantage of it because it is always available to people and it's important.
We've even prior to the Rust incident, ISS has always been very pro training. We've assisted the California State Fire Marshal with their firearms program and other agencies. We've never turned anyone away when they came in looking for knowledge, experience, and training. We do our best to make sure that when you walk away from the counter with the firearm you're signing out, you may feel confident that you're able to use it, but if we don't feel confident that you're able to use it, we hold you there a little longer.
Yeah.
You know,
like it had to have been 12 or 13 years ago. I walked in, never touched. I just got my EFP. The prop master didn't have it on the show. They're like, okay, there's a scene where a guy's cleaning out a 1911. Never touched a gun before in my life. I just got it. I was like, well, I got this. I go in there, and I go in. I think John Welch was
right
there at the time. So and John is helping me, and he just goes, "Oh, a 1911." And it's like, I was like, "Yeah." So could you just show me real quick how to clean out? He's like, "It ain't gonna be real quick."
Yeah, exactly.
and he sits down. And he's like, "All right, I'm gonna do it. Then you're gonna do it, and we're gonna do it together and see." And then I remember from that, I'm so happy that was the first gun that I kind of like learned the ins and outs of because of how like difficult it is,
it's a beast.
and that little bead in the front that just shoots across the room, the spring, and came on and having to piece together. I remember like I got it together and I got the understanding, and he was like, "All right, I think you're good." And I went home and I literally just did it over and over and over again, and that scene went amazing. And I was so grateful for that because every handgun that I rented at that point, I took it apart and figured out the ins and outs. And I think that's like where the knowledge and it's like, okay, I need to learn more about this. You know?
Well, you know, they've always used the analogy that a film crew, the logistics of a film crew is like the logistics of an army in the field, right? So at the shop, when you come in and you sign out a firearm, we kind of feel like we're the general who's sending you out into battle, you know, and we don't want to send you out ill-equipped.
Yeah.
We may be staying back at the armory, but we're there to support you. We want to make sure that you have the best chance for success, which is not only good for you, it's good for us, but it's also good for the entire industry.
Totally. Right.
That, like you said, that by the time you get out there, the scene goes flawlessly.
Yeah.
Right? Because we don't want negative media, you know, headlines and different things like that. That's not who we are. We really are more about everything going flawlessly.
Yeah.
Our industry overall, based on OSHA statistics, overall is about 4 times safer than any other industry out there, primarily because of the self-governance of contract services and all these safety bulletins. I feel like that's something that got missed because of the headlines.
Of course.
Of the Rust incident.
Yes.
It was big, it was sexy, it was actors, and it was Hollywood, so things got blown out of proportion. But think of all the millions, if not billions, of rounds of blanks that have been used flawlessly.
Yeah.
All the films where nobody got hurt, not by a train, not by an airplane, not by a firearm, you know. This industry is a safe industry. And people getting into the industry, young people who are coming up, they should feel confident in that.
Sure.
And again, training like this is, like we've been discussing, is the key to that confidence.
And it is a safe industry, considering inherently it is a dangerous business, that filmmaking.
You know,
There's a lot of ways to get hurt on set.
Yeah, but you know what? You could get hit by a bus crossing the street too.
Sure.
I don't know. Like, you know, is working on a film set, to use your word, more dangerous than being a police officer, let's say, or more dangerous than being a fireman, right? It's a different kind of danger. But I don't think it's danger. I think it's we do some really cool things that the average person never gets to do. Are they complex? Yes, for sure.
Sure.
Do they require experience, knowledge, and training? Absolutely. Don't ever go into it, you know, with it. It's like rock climbing. You don't want to climb a mountain with a novice. Right? You need someone that's a little bit more seasoned, that knows that if something goes wrong, they know how to handle it, and so on. That's what being on a movie set is. I disagree with you on that, using the term dangerous, Chris. I understand what you're saying.
I mean, a lot of things can fall on your head on a movie set, you know. I mean, you're always running and gunning and you're in new places. And, you know, I mean, I'm just saying, I'm impressed that there's there's not as much incidents as there could be.
And that's a testament to the professionalism
100%.
of our industry and of people like at organizations like Contract Services who take safety of the workers like really to heart.
Exactly. That's why
live and breathe it.
That's right. That's why I have safety meetings every morning.
Absolutely.
Okay, because we need them. Okay, because there are a lot of things that we're doing. You know, there's no safety meetings when you go to work at Costco, right? You know, so I mean, again, I'm saying
another place where things can fall.
That's right. I've
hit
seen
you in the head.
They got full ass pallets.
Yeah,
that's great. Those are some great videos. Anyway, well, Larry, thank you for coming out once again.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's great to have you. You're always so well spoken about it, and I always learn something new every time we speak. So, thank you.
I'm always happy to come back. Thank you guys for putting it on, and thank you to the PMG for actually spearheading this whole, media kind of outreach to everyone. I think it's great for the industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, all right,
Mikey, wrap it up.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to reiterate some. I mean, if you're out there, you're a prop master, and you see a movie that the props were awesome in, reach out to the prop master who did it and give him some praise. It's always good to hear from our peers. I want to keep saying that. Reach out. All the contacts for almost all not all prop masters, but a great majority of them are on the PMG's website. So go ahead and check that out. Also, if there's not a PMG on your tap quarterly in your region and you want to have one, reach out to us. We'll help you plan one. These gatherings are starting to be pretty awesome, and most places around the country and outside of the country, out in UK and stuff like that. Thank you, everybody, for tuning into another episode of Prop Talk, the official podcast of the Property Masters Guild, brought to you by real working and retired prop masters and associates, which armorers can be associates. So if you are an armorer, please join us, get involved. We have lots of committees and stuff that you can get really involved in, and get involved. Join us. If this is your first time listening, please make sure to like, subscribe, and comment wherever you're hearing this or watching it. We're on YouTube. If you would like to know more information about the Property Masters Guild or have any questions for us here at Prop Talk, if you have requests for a prop master to be on, go ahead and shoot us a message on Instagram @_the PMG, or you can reach us at propertymastersguild.org. All the other information's there too. We're on all the other social. Just look up for Property Masters Guild. And that's it.
Bye, everybody.